1513, Florence, Italy. Niccolò Machiavelli sits alone in his study, exiled from power, forgotten by the world he once advised. He writes something that will be read for centuries, misunderstood for even longer. Most people think Machiavelli wrote about cruelty, about manipulation, about being ruthless. They're wrong. Machiavelli wrote about survival, about the invisible laws that govern human behavior, about the brutal reality beneath every smile, every handshake, every promise. And what he discovered was so uncomfortable, so undeniable, that 500 years later, we still call his name synonymous with evil. But here's what they don't tell you. Machiavelli wasn't teaching you how to be cruel. He was teaching you how to see through cruelty, how to recognize the game being played around you, how to stop being the pawn. Because in his world and in ours, there are two types of people: those who understand power and those who are crushed by it. Tonight we explore what Machiavelli actually said. Not the caricature, not the myth, the real teachings, the ones that make you dangerous, not because you'll harm others, but because you'll stop being harmed. This is the Hidden Codex, where ancient wisdom meets modern power. Niccolò Machiavelli, born 1469, died 1527. Florentine diplomat, philosopher, political strategist. To most, he's the man who wrote The Prince, a short, brutal manual on power that scandalized Europe and earned him eternal infamy. But Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to glorify tyranny. He wrote it as a mirror, a reflection of how power actually works, not how we wish it worked, how it does work, in palaces, in boardrooms, in every relationship where one person has something the other wants. And what he saw, across decades of serving the Florentine Republic, negotiating with kings and generals and popes, was this: the rules everyone claims to follow are theater. Beneath them lies a different set of rules, unspoken, unwritten, but absolute. These are the rules that determine who rises and who falls, who commands respect and who begs for it, who shapes their reality and who has reality shaped for them. Machiavelli spent his life studying these hidden rules, and when he was finally cast out, stripped of power, left with nothing but time, he wrote them down. Not just in The Prince, in his letters, in the discourses, in private notes meant only for those willing to see the world as it truly is. Tonight we reveal them. Before we go deeper, if you sense that there's more beneath the surface of human interaction than politeness and good intentions, if you're ready to see the mechanisms that actually govern respect and influence, subscribe to the Hidden Codex. Turn on notifications, because what comes next cannot be unlearned. Let's continue. Machiavelli observed something early in his career, something that haunted him for the rest of his life. He watched good men fail, honest men destroyed, moral men crushed beneath the wheels of those willing to do what they refused to do. And he watched ruthless men succeed. Not always, but often enough to see the pattern. Most people, when they see this, choose one of two paths. They either become cynical and abandon all principles, or they retreat into denial, insisting the world isn't really like that. Machiavelli chose a third path. He decided to study it, to understand it, to map the territory of power as it actually exists, not as philosophers and priests claim it should exist. And what he found was this: respect is not given freely. It's never earned through kindness alone. It's never guaranteed by competence or virtue or hard work. Respect is taken, or it's commanded, or it's strategically constructed. And the moment you stop actively maintaining it, it begins to erode. Most people misunderstand this completely. They believe respect is something you deserve, that if you're good enough, skilled enough, moral enough, respect will naturally flow to you. Machiavelli saw the opposite. He saw that respect is a perception, a calculation others make about you, and that calculation has nothing to do with your inner goodness. It has everything to do with how you present yourself, what you're willing to do, what you're capable of doing. In The Prince, Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see but few can feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." Pause. He wasn't saying be fake. He was saying perception is reality. That in the theater of human interaction, what people believe about you matters infinitely more than who you actually are. Because they can't see inside you. They can only see your actions, your reactions, your boundaries, your presence. And from those signals they decide, is this person to be respected or dismissed? So how does this work in practice? Let's say you're in a professional environment. You're skilled, hardworking, you deliver results, and yet somehow you're not taken seriously. Your ideas are overlooked, your contributions minimized, others with less competence command more attention. Most people in this situation do one of two things. They either work harder, thinking more output will earn respect, or they complain, thinking others just don't see their value. But if you understand Machiavelli, you see the problem differently. You're not being overlooked because of what you lack. You're being overlooked because of what you project. You've trained others to see you as harmless, as accommodating, as someone who can be ignored without consequence. Machiavelli would ask, what have you done to make them fear dismissing you? Not fear as in terror, fear as in respect, as an awareness that dismissing you carries a cost. That's the shift. Most people try to earn respect by being useful. Machiavelli teaches you to earn respect by being formidable. Useful can be replaced, formidable cannot. Machiavelli studied leaders who maintained power and those who lost it, and he noticed a pattern. The leaders who lasted weren't the nicest, or the smartest, or even the most ruthless. They were the most calculated, the most strategic, the ones who understood that power is a game of perception and positioning. And the first rule of that game is this: never reveal your full hand. Machiavelli wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." Most people read that and think, be clever and strong. That's not what he's saying. He's saying you need two modes. The fox is strategy, cunning, the ability to see through deception and navigate complexity. The lion is force, presence, the ability to command when strategy isn't enough. But here's the key. You don't use both at the same time. You don't announce which one you're using. You don't let others see the transition. You appear as whatever is most advantageous in the moment. And you do it so smoothly that others never realize you're shifting. This is what makes you dangerous. Not because you're deceptive, but because you're adaptable, unpredictable, capable of responding to any situation with the exact energy it requires. Most people are locked into one mode, always the fox, always clever but never commanding, or always the lion, always forceful but easily outsmarted. Machiavelli teaches you to master both, and to let others guess which one they're dealing with. That uncertainty alone generates respect. In 1502, Machiavelli was sent to observe Cesare Borgia, one of the most feared and effective leaders of Renaissance Italy. Borgia had just taken control of the Romagna, a fractious region torn apart by petty warlords and endless violence. Everyone expected Borgia to rule through terror, and at first he did. He installed a brutal governor, Ramiro de Orco, who crushed dissent without mercy. The region stabilized, fast. But then Borgia did something unexpected. He had Ramiro arrested, executed, and displayed his body in the town square, cut in half. The people were shocked, relieved. They saw Borgia not as a tyrant, but as a just ruler who had removed a cruel administrator. Machiavelli watched this and understood. Borgia hadn't changed. He'd used Ramiro to do the dirty work, then distanced himself from the brutality by punishing the man who carried it out. The violence was still Borgia's, but the perception was transformed. Machiavelli wrote about this in The Prince, not to glorify it, but to reveal the mechanism. Leaders who want to be respected, who want to maintain control, understand this. You can commit harsh actions, but you cannot be seen as the source of harshness. You create distance. You use intermediaries. You frame the narrative so that when the dust settles, you appear not as the villain, but as the one who restored order. Most people recoil from this. They call it manipulative. But Machiavelli would ask, is it more manipulative to hide your methods, or to naively believe that power doesn't require strategy? Because here's the truth. If you refuse to play the game, you don't stay innocent. You just become the one the game is played upon. Now let's talk about what Machiavelli never said out loud. The thing implied in every chapter of The Prince, but never stated directly. Most people think Machiavelli was teaching princes how to rule. He wasn't. He was teaching anyone willing to listen how to see through rulers. Because once you understand the tactics of power, once you recognize the patterns, you can't be controlled by them. You see the intermediary strategy. You see the calculated displays of force. You see the fox and the lion at work. And once you see it, you have a choice. You can be horrified and retreat, or you can learn the language and use it yourself. Not to dominate others, but to stop being dominated. That's the real gift of Machiavelli. He's not teaching you to be a tyrant. He's teaching you to stop being a victim. Machiavelli observed that people fall into two categories: those who set the terms and those who accept them. Most people spend their entire lives accepting terms set by others. They negotiate from positions they didn't choose. They follow rules they didn't make. They respect boundaries imposed on them while having their own boundaries ignored. And they wonder why they feel powerless. Machiavelli would say, because you are. Not because you lack ability, but because you've never claimed authority over your own position. Setting terms doesn't mean being aggressive. It doesn't mean steamrolling others or refusing compromise. It means understanding that every interaction is a negotiation, and in every negotiation, someone frames the conversation. If it's not you, it's them. Machiavelli wrote, "Whoever is the cause of another's power is ruined himself." Think about that. If you build someone else's position, you weaken your own. If you make someone else's success possible without securing your own, you create an imbalance that will eventually destroy you. This doesn't mean be selfish. It means be strategic. Recognize when you're giving away leverage. Recognize when you're empowering someone at your own expense. And stop. Not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. Because Machiavelli understood something most people refuse to accept. The world does not reward self-sacrifice. It rewards strength. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse. In his later work, The Discourses, Machiavelli went even deeper. He studied republics, systems built on shared power rather than singular authority. And he found the same patterns. In every system, visible or hidden, formal or informal, there are those who command and those who follow. But here's what he noticed. The most respected individuals in republics weren't the loudest, or the most aggressive, or even the most skilled. They were the ones others feared to cross, not because they were violent, but because crossing them carried consequences. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." This is his most famous line, and his most misunderstood. He's not saying be cruel. He's saying that when forced to choose between being liked and being respected, choose respect. Because likability is fragile. It depends on others' whims. It can vanish the moment you disappoint someone or say no. But respect, real respect, is durable. It's based on recognition of capability, of boundaries, of consequence. People may not always like you, but if they respect you, they treat you carefully. And that careful treatment is what protects you, what gives you space, what allows you to operate without constant interference or disregard. Most people chase likability and wonder why they're walked over. Machiavelli would say, because you taught them they could. So how do you become respected in a way that matters? In a way that actually changes how others interact with you? Machiavelli offers 3 principles. First, control your image ruthlessly, not by lying, but by being deliberate about what you reveal, about how you respond, about the patterns you establish. Most people are careless with their image. They overshare, they react emotionally, they let others see them in moments of weakness or desperation. Machiavelli would say, every time you do that, you lose ground. Because others are watching, calculating, deciding where you fit in their mental hierarchy. And if they see you as reactive, as desperate, as easily rattled, they categorize you as beneath them. But if they see you as composed, deliberate, unmoved by the things that shake others, they recalibrate. They start to think, this person is different. Engaging them requires more care. That's the shift. From someone who can be handled to someone who must be approached correctly. Second principle, establish consequences for disrespect. This is where most people fail completely. They tolerate disrespect. They let it slide. They convince themselves it's not worth addressing. Machiavelli would call this the beginning of your downfall. Because disrespect, left unchallenged, becomes permission. It trains others that crossing your boundaries costs nothing. And once that pattern is set, it's almost impossible to reverse. So you must immediately and consistently create cost, not through drama, not through anger, but through withdrawal of access, of cooperation, of good faith. The moment someone disrespects you, they lose something, every time. And they learn, this person defends their position. Testing them is expensive. That's how respect is built. Through consistency, through consequence. Third principle, never explain your boundaries. Most people, when they set a boundary, feel compelled to justify it, to explain why, to apologize for it. Machiavelli would say, "Stop." The moment you justify your boundary, you invite negotiation. You signal that your boundary is optional, that with the right argument, you can be moved. And once people sense that, they will push. Every time. But if you state your boundary without explanation, without apology, without justification, you create a different dynamic. You signal, this is simply how it is, not up for debate, not flexible. And most people, when confronted with that level of certainty, simply accept it. Not because they like it, but because challenging it seems futile. Machiavelli wrote in a letter to a friend, "I believe that it is possible for a man to conduct himself in such a way that he is never underestimated." Think about what he's saying. Never underestimated. Not loved, not even admired, simply never underestimated. That's the goal. To position yourself so that others, whether they like you or not, whether they agree with you or not, recognize that dismissing you is a mistake. How do you do that? Through presence, through consistency, through a refusal to tolerate being diminished. Most people underestimate themselves first. They shrink, they accommodate, they apologize for taking up space. And others learn to underestimate them too. But if you operate as if your value is non-negotiable, as if your presence commands attention not because you demand it, but because you embody it, others adjust. They may resist, they may test, but eventually they adjust. Because the alternative, ignoring you, becomes too costly. That's dangerous respect. Not because you're a threat, but because you're immovable. Machiavelli knew something else, something darker. He knew that most people are ruled by appearances, that they respond not to reality, but to perception, that they'll forgive almost anything if it's packaged correctly, and condemn almost anything if it's framed poorly. He wrote, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." This wasn't cynicism, it was observation. Machiavelli had watched leaders lie, manipulate, betray, and yet remain beloved. And he'd watched honest leaders fail because they couldn't manage perception. So, he concluded, morality alone doesn't protect you. Goodness alone doesn't secure your position. What protects you is understanding how others think, how they decide who to trust, who to fear, who to respect, and then positioning yourself accordingly. This is where Machiavelli becomes truly dangerous to the naive worldview most people carry, because he's asking you to abandon the comforting belief that being good is enough. He's asking you to recognize that the world operates on different principles, and that if you refuse to learn those principles, you will be outmaneuvered by those who do. Not because you're weak, but because you're playing by rules no one else is following. 3 years before his death, Machiavelli wrote something in his personal correspondence, something he never published, something meant only for a close friend. He wrote, "I love my country more than my soul." Think about that. More than my soul. Machiavelli was willing to sacrifice his eternal salvation, his moral standing, his reputation, for the survival and strength of Florence. That's the level of commitment he's describing. Not to power for power's sake, but to effectiveness, to results, to the brutal pragmatism required to protect what matters. Most people aren't willing to go there. They want to be effective and remain morally pure. They want to command respect and never compromise their principles. Machiavelli would say, choose. Because in the real world, the one where people lie and betray and manipulate, purity is a luxury. A beautiful luxury, but still a luxury. And those who cling to it while others operate without it don't win. They lose. Gracefully, maybe. Honorably, perhaps. But they lose. That's the choice Machiavelli forces you to confront. Are you willing to do what's necessary? Or will you do what feels right and hope it's enough? Most people hope. Machiavelli didn't. Now here's what Machiavelli never said directly but implied throughout all his work. The ultimate form of power isn't controlling others, it's controlling yourself. Because the leader who can be provoked is controllable. The person who reacts emotionally is predictable. The one who seeks approval is manipulable. But the individual who masters their own reactions, who operates from clarity rather than emotion, who doesn't need validation or fear rejection, that person is untouchable. Machiavelli wrote about external strategy, but the foundation of all his strategy is internal mastery. If you can't control your fear, others will exploit it. If you can't control your anger, others will provoke it. If you can't control your need for approval, others will withhold it until you comply. But if you are internally sovereign, if your sense of self doesn't depend on others' opinions, if your decisions aren't driven by emotion, then you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. Because others can't manipulate what they can't anticipate. They can't control what they can't provoke. That's dangerous respect, not because you're aggressive, but because you're unreactive. Most people are moved by praise, by criticism, by social pressure. They adjust their behavior to fit in, to avoid conflict, to maintain harmony. And that adjustment is where they lose themselves. Machiavelli teaches you to stop adjusting, to define your position, to hold it regardless of pressure. Not stubbornly, but deliberately. And when you do that consistently, something shifts. Others stop trying to move you, because they realize it won't work. And they start instead to move around you, to accommodate you, to treat you as a fixed point. That's the reversal, from being moved to being immovable. In 1513, Machiavelli was interrogated, tortured, suspected of conspiracy against the Medici family that had retaken Florence. They wanted him to confess, to implicate others, to break. He didn't. Not because he was physically strong, but because he was mentally immovable. He endured the strappado, a torture where the victim's arms are tied behind their back and they're hoisted into the air, dislocating shoulders, tearing muscle. And when they finally released him, when they realized he wouldn't give them what they wanted, he walked out. And immediately he began writing The Prince. Not in bitterness, not in revenge, but in clarity. Because Machiavelli understood something profound. Pain is temporary, reputation is permanent. If he had broken, if he had betrayed others to save himself, he would have carried that weakness forever. Others would have known, and his words, his teachings, would have been dismissed as the desperate pleas of a coward. But because he held, because he endured without breaking, he earned something unshakable: credibility. When Machiavelli writes about strength, you believe him because he demonstrated it, not in theory, in reality. That's the final principle of dangerous respect. You earn it not through what you say, but through what you endure. Through the moments when breaking would have been easier, when compromising would have been understandable. But you didn't. And everyone who knows that story, everyone who sees that pattern in you, recognizes this person is different. This person doesn't fold. That recognition is power. So let's bring this together. Machiavelli spent his life studying power, observing it, documenting it, analyzing what worked and what failed. And he distilled it into a few core truths. Power is not given. It's taken or commanded. Respect is not earned through goodness. It's earned through presence, consistency, and consequence. Others will test you, always. And how you respond to those tests determines your position. If you accommodate, if you shrink, if you allow disrespect to pass without cost, you train others to diminish you. But if you hold your ground, if you create consequence, if you refuse to tolerate being undervalued, others adjust. Not immediately, not always willingly, but they adjust. Because the alternative is conflict. And most people, given the choice, will avoid conflict with someone they perceive as formidable. That's the shift Machiavelli teaches, from being someone who can be safely ignored to someone who must be carefully considered, from being accommodating to being immovable, from being liked to being respected. And once you cross that threshold, everything changes. People speak to you differently. They treat your time differently. They test you less and consider you more. Not because you've become cruel, but because you've become clear. Clear about your value. Clear about your boundaries. Clear about the cost of crossing you. And that clarity, that self-possession, that refusal to negotiate your position, that's what makes you dangerously respected. Dangerous not because you harm others, but because you can no longer be harmed without consequence. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in weeks, but he lived its principles for decades. And when he died in 1527, penniless and forgotten by the rulers he once advised, his work remained. Not as a manual for tyrants, but as a mirror, showing us what we refuse to see. That the world operates on power, that respect is strategic, that survival requires more than goodness. It requires clarity, strength, the willingness to see reality and operate within it. Most people can't do that. They retreat into fantasy, into the belief that being good will be enough. Machiavelli asks, will it? Or will you, like so many before you, be crushed by those who understand the game you refuse to see? The choice is yours. But now you know what Machiavelli knew. You've seen behind the curtain. You understand the mechanisms. What you do with that understanding, that's up to you. Machiavelli isn't asking you to become ruthless. He's asking you to become awake, to stop pretending the world is fair, to stop hoping people will respect you just because you're competent or kind. They won't, not unless you give them reason to. And that reason isn't cruelty, it's strength, it's presence, it's the quiet certainty that you will not be moved. That's dangerous respect. And once you have it, you'll never go back to hoping for approval. Because you'll have something better. You'll have position. If this opened your eyes to the mechanisms beneath human interaction, if you're ready to see more of what philosophy buried and power concealed, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because here at the Hidden Codex, we don't stop at the surface. We go into the shadows, into the silence, into the truths they tried to erase. Next time, we explore Carl Jung's confrontation with the unconscious. The 7 years he spent documenting his descent into what he called the underworld of the psyche. What he found there shattered everything psychology thought it knew about the human mind. You don't want to miss that. Until then, stay awake, stay immovable, and remember, respect isn't given, it's commanded.